Oh. At least I didn't explode this time. Most of you guys won't know this, but the car I drive in real life is this thing. The 2013 1.2 litre 16 valve Mark II Dacia Sandero, or as most people call it, the Dacia Sandero.
The Dacia Sandero is almost here.
When?
Next year.
Great! Now, the Toyota Urban Cruiser.
The Dacia Sandero is an affordable hatchback made by the Romanians. Dacia is a car brand that is owned by Renault and acts as Renault's more budget-friendly brand. For example, my car, the 2013 Dacia Sandero, has the same engine as one of these, a Mark IV Renault Clio. It also shares the radio and media controls from older generations of Renault Clio, making it a very decent choice for a budget-oriented customer who just wants a basic car to get them from A to B. And considering that this car only costed around £7,000 brand new and gets very good petrol mileage, whilst actually driving pretty decently well, I would say that this car was an absolute steal at the time. Mix all of this with its celebrity-like fame on Top Gear thanks to James May's huge massive boner for the car, and it's no surprise why Dacia Sanderos are still selling extremely well in the UK, even to this day. That rhymed, that was pretty nice.
Days to get here in the
Anyway though, enough rambling, let's get to the point of today's video. As you can tell by the title in today's video, I'll be ranking every generation of Dacia Sandero, from the Mark I we never got in the UK, all the way up to the brand new Mark III, and along the way I'll rank some different variants from all across the world. So buckle up, get your cheese sauce ready, and let's get on with the ranking.
Go. Put the cheese in the grater, turn your finger around in the drum, put the cheese in the grater, turn your finger around in the drum, put the cheese in the grater, turn your finger around in the drum, put the cheese in the grater.
Starting off strong in today's list, we have the Mark I Dacia Sandero, which was a left-hand drive market exclusive that released back in 2007 and was produced until 2012. When this car was first released, it was sold as the Renault Sandero and was the first Renault sold outside of Europe, with its country of release being Brazil. It later made its way onto the market in Europe as the Dacia Sandero in 2008, and this was the original car James May got all excited for and got to drive in Romania in Series 14, Episode 1 of Top Gear. Before getting hit by a truck, that is.
days to get here in the
Enough waffling though, what do I think of this car? Well, to be completely honest, I really like the look of the front end of this car, as it looks like a much less aggressive version and simple looking version of a Mark II Renault Clio. However, as much as I love the front end, I really don't like the look of the back end of this car. I don't know why exactly, it's just a little bit odd shaped and awkward looking. However, it's such an unoffensive looking car overall, so it's quite hard to hate on. And the fact that this car came out with so many engine options definitely makes up for the looks in my opinion, as you could get anything from a 1 litre engine making 77 horsepower all the way up to a staggering 1.6 litre making 112 horsepower, which I'm genuinely so upset about because we didn't get that for the Mark II in the UK, as it was instead replaced with a measly 0.9 litre engine with a turbocharger. The interior for this car is honestly what you expect for a car costing around £6,000 and is very basic and utilitarian. However, it gets the job done, which is the whole point of these cars. Now, I know I've spoken about this car way too much and I will shorten the explanations from here on out. However, this car is what started Dacia's takeover of the car industry around the world, so I think it deserved the explanation. And because this car is what started it all, and because it became a huge meme on Top Gear, thanks to James May's love for the car, I think it easily belongs in the oh look tier. For the next car on today's list, we have my personal car, the Mark II Dacia Sandero. Released in the back end of 2012 in Romania and later released in the UK in 2013 for around £7,000. The Mark II Dacia Sandero is very similar to the Mark I in many ways. It's still a very affordable hatchback with the basic necessities. However, they started to add some more premium features in this model's higher trim levels, such as a touchscreen infotainment system in the higher trim levels and even Bluetooth connectivity in the more middle level trims, quite similar to my car. Now, this may seem very basic, but you have to remember a competing car at the time like a Ford Fiesta would have costed around triple the price of this car, whilst not necessarily having 3 times the features and practicality. The Mark II Sandero is also, in my opinion, a massive improvement over the Mark I in terms of looks. The front end of this car is way sexier than your mom and is a bit more sporty looking over the Mark I. The fat ass in the rear may look a little basic, similar to the Mark I. However, I do personally prefer the look of it, despite a lot of people probably disagree with me on that. However, overall, the Mark II Dacia Sandero is just an overall overall improvement and continuation of the Mark 1 while still staying affordable and practical. It is also the car that James May drove across Ukraine into Chernobyl, which is something that makes it a lot more of a special car in my opinion. So even though I'm definitely biased towards this car, I do still definitely think that the Mark 2 Dacia Sandero belongs in the oh look tier right next to the Mark 1 for being a steady progression of the car's name. The Mark II Dacia Sandero facelift released back in 2016 and was pretty much the exact same as the original Mark II, with some minor changes to the front and rear lights. Now in my opinion, the front end actually looks worse with the facelift, however the rear looks slightly better with the lights. However, this facelift was barely noticeable and didn't change much, so although it's still just as good of a car as the original Mark II, in my opinion, it belongs in A tier for being a pretty lackluster facelift.
What about now? It's time to rock with the biggity back bumper. What about now? It's time to rock with the biggity back bumper. Bum to the bump to the bump to the bass. Bum to the bump to the bumper. Bum to the bump to the bump to the bass. Bum to the bump to the bumper. Bum to the bump to the bump to the bass. Bum to the bump to the bumper.
The next car on today's list is the Dacia Sandero Stepway, which is basically like a more rugged crossover version of the Sandero based on the same chassis. The Sandero Stepway is basically the same car as the normal Sandero, but just for people who want something that's a little bit higher off the ground and more suitable for stuff like camping or long trips. They have made the Stepway edition for all main versions of the normal Dacia Sandero, as far as I'm aware that is, and they only costed around $1,000 to about $3,000 extra on top of the normal cost of the Sandero, making it a very competitively priced small crossover for people who want a slightly bigger car. Now I won't be ranking every version of the Stepway as they are all just upsized versions of their respective Sanderos. Now I actually do quite like the Stepways in terms of looks and what they offer, however I wouldn't say that they're anything special, and I do think that the changes made to the car aren't really going to be necessarily useful for most people. However, I am glad the options are there, and I think overall the Stepway models as a whole can easily go into A tier. The next car we have here today is one which I really wish we had here in the UK. You see how that rhymed? However, it is actually an exclusive car to the South American market, which was produced from 2015 all the way up to 2021. The car I'm talking about is the Renault Sandero RS, a 2-litre hot hatch variant of the Renault Sandero, featuring full disc brakes, 150 horsepower, and a 0-60 time of around 8 seconds. Combined with the steering wheel from a Renault Clio RS and the extremely respectable price of around £14,000 at the time of sale, this car was an absolute steal for the price. The Renault Sandero RS featured some slightly more sporty looking front and rear bumpers and a twin exhaust system, however managed to keep the overall simple and practical design. The interior actually looks quite nice in my opinion, with the striped sporty seats, however I do like that they still kept it very simple and utilitarian looking, and they made sure not to add any unnecessary features that would bump up the price by a considerable amount. The Renault Sandero RS is in my opinion a really slept on and underrated car, which I wish we had here in the UK to compete against the likes of other companies like Ford and Volkswagen. However, I do understand that this thing would compete with its own close relative, the Renault Clio RS, which is why they would have never sold this car here in the UK. Overall though, what is there not to love about a cheap 2-litre 6-speed manual hot hatch for only £14,000? The Renault Sandero RS manages to be both an exciting and yet still affordable and practical car in line with the rest of the Sandero lineup, and I would absolutely love to own or at least drive one in the future, and I think that most people would agree that this car easily goes into the oh look tier.
Hello viewers, good news. It's the new Dacia / Dacia Sandero. Like, comment, subscribe. Ham, beans, egg, cheese.
The pre-facelift Mark III Dacia Sandero is the next car on today's list, and I think you get the idea by now. It's cheap, It's practical, and it's a perfect car for getting from A to B. However, when it comes to looks, this is where the Mark III Dacia Sandero stands out from the last two versions, with the biggest change in appearance yet out of all of the models. Now, in my personal opinion, the front end of this car actually looks really nice and tidy, and really reminds me of a Volkswagen Polo of the same year. The rear end to me was a bit of a downgrade on the original Mark III, as I really hated the look of the taillights. However, that's pretty much just personal preference from me, and I'm sure most people think it looks perfectly fine. For a car released in 2020, it was still set at a very reasonable price, costing around £8,000 to £13,000 for the respective lowest and highest trim levels, which, although is a decent increase in price, still left it as the most affordable car in the UK at the time. And considering the improvements made to both the interior and exterior, I think the extra couple grand was definitely worth paying for. Overall, the Mark III Dacia Sandero is an overall improvement compared to the previous cars, and although its looks are a bit hit and miss for me personally, I still think it's an amazing, affordable little car that belongs in the A tier.
What is this, dealer? Taking a piss, I've been standing here for 30 minutes. Why is this, dealer?
The 2023 facelift of the Mark III Sandero was released to update the styling of the car and to account for the rebranding Dacia was undergoing at the time. With its new sleek logo design, most stuff stayed the same with the facelift, other than some improvements to the overall design and some minor features. However, in my opinion, this is where Dacia started to go downhill slightly, and that is mainly due to the fact that this car now started at around £14,000 and went all the way up to the price of £17,000, which really started to seem less like a budget-friendly price and more like a slightly cheaper price than something more premium like a Renault Clio for around £17,000 for a base trim. Or if you wanted to spend a little bit of extra money, you could get a Volkswagen Polo for around £21,000, which is a premium German car. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that at £17,000 you're getting the highest level Dacia Sandero versus a base level Polo for £21,000. However, let's face it, most people at this price range are going to be financing their cars anyway and would most likely be happy to spend the extra £100 or so a month for something more premium. Now, we understand with the way things are going in the world and the more strict safety standards requiring cars to have more electronics as standard, it's hard for companies like Dacia to sell you a car at such a cheap price. However, £7,000 to £8,000 was a reasonable price to expect people to pay all at once for a car, being somewhat easy to afford for the average person if they save up a little. However, I'd say around £15,000 definitely isn't, especially when considering minimum wage hasn't increased with line of the cost of living. To cut my waffling short, what I'm basically saying is, although the 2023 Dacia Sandero is an amazing little hatchback, it isn't quite the bargain it used to be, and for that reason exactly, I think it belongs in B tier. After making this list, I am actually realising most of the cars are quite high on the tier list, so to fill it out, the Citroen C3 goes in C tier, and the Nissan Juke goes in D tier, along with any car with a CVT transmission as the only option. So then there we have it, my ranking of every main Dacia Sandero sold around the world. Now, I am aware I've missed many versions from different countries with slight differences to looks and features. However, this video was already way too much talking about the Dacia Sandero, so if you want to see me make a video on those other versions, then let me know in the comments below. And also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, because my car is currently misfiring. So if you want to sponsor me Raid Shadow Legends, please reach out to me. But with all that said, hope you guys enjoyed today's ranking, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!
Here we go. Put the cheese in the grater, turn your finger around in the drum. Put the cheese in the grater, turn your finger around in the drum. Put the cheese in the grater, turn your finger around in the drum. Put the cheese in the grater. Cheese. These are cheese. Which is best? Which is best in a sandwich? A knob of cheese, cheddar, red Leicester.